Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, as well as on Amazon. And my books are in audio as of about 2 to 3 weeks ago on Amazon. I have a return guest. I'm really happy to have attorney Christine Miller back on. She was last on the podcast, season 5, episode 121 and 133, where we had talked last about family court at its turning point and the third-party parasites that contribute to chaos. And today we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about the Judge Ogden developments and cameras and how they really should be in courtrooms. And I also will throw in, I really think family court should just be abolished. Welcome, Attorney Christine.
Hi, good morning. How are
Uh,
you?
Good. How are you doing?
I am fabulous. It's been a whirlwind the past couple weeks.
Oh, yeah, it has been crazy. So, this Judge Ogden, Ogden recused herself finally.
Yes, and that case is really what blew up in Louisville. I mean, as you know, I've been trying to expose and talk about the issues in Louisville family court and just all family courts for the past year. But there was a case, and I did two four-part series on it. There was a writ of prohibition that was granted by the Court of Appeals, which is extraordinarily rare. It's because there was a substantial miscarriage of justice that they needed to prevent, according to the Kentucky Court of Appeals. And this was a case where essentially Judge Ogden, mom and dad signed an agreed order, and dad had sole custody. Mom wasn't seeking visitation. Actually, more pleadings have been filed since my videos where it shows the limited, if any, relationship between the baby and mom. Mom wanted to give the child up for adoption, according to dad, but dad had had this infant since birth.
Oh,
And they'd signed this agreed order, and mom came back, and it appears because of paternal grandmother wanting the baby. But Judge Ogden conducted a hearing after it had been canceled without dad present over dad's counsel's objection, and then had the handoff of the baby occur in open court.
so yeah, I saw that video of this poor baby in a car seat with someone sitting with this baby, and these courtroom floors are filthy.
Filthy.
Anyway, so what was it? The maternal grandmother wanted this baby,
It
right?
was actually paternal.
No, really?
Yes, so it
Okay,
was dad's mom.
okay, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that was I wasn't sure because sometimes when you watch everybody's TikToks and some things aren't clear and I'm not or they go over my head, and I wasn't sure who. I thought it was the maternal because you would think it would be. You have it in your head that the mother's mother would want the kid.
Absolutely. And I think, and I can see where if we want to give everybody the best of intentions, I can see to some degree where paternal grandmother comes and says something about dad that the court has concerns. No one is upset with the fact that the court ordered dad to bring the child back, or at least from a legal perspective, because the reality is, even though dad had sole custody in Kentucky, there is still a relocation statute that you have to follow. The problem is the lack of due process, the lack of hearing from dad. And if the court would have even devoted 20 minutes to this case and sworn the parties, it would have been clear what was happening.
Hmm.
And so, like you said, it was hard to follow on TikTok what was happening. Well, it was hard to follow in real time because the judge made these decisions with little to no information.
Hmm.
We don't take people's children without due process, or let me correct myself, we shouldn't. I think this happens more regularly, and I'm sure you agree, than what people realize.
Hmm. Yeah, and the public doesn't know. And if they haven't been through family court, and I hope they never go into family court, but this is why we have to have these cameras in there in every courtroom.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so bizarre to see in real time the effect that the public just seeing what actually happened
Hmm.
has done for the awareness.
Hmm.
And I have been talking for a year. You've been talking for 5, 10 years
Five.
about family court. And there is a massive movement throughout the country. But what I keep saying is that when people tell you their stories, you think they're crazy because the stories sound crazy. And it isn't until you see it in real time. And I talked about my mother and my Nana watching this video, and they know me well and are supportive of what I do. But I've been just telling people what's going on as opposed to showing them.
Hmm.
And we are lucky in Kentucky that we have cameras in courtroom, and I'm really working to get tons of videos because don't listen to me. Don't listen to you. Let's just watch and see what these judges are doing, and y'all form your opinion.
Hmm. Right. And this is why I really want to see the family court shut down.
At this point, I believe in abolishing family court. I think it is well intentioned, and I know that I get pushback on that, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Mhm.
And it is not working for families, it
No.
is not working for children. It is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. There is no winning in family court.
Mm-mm.
You're in family court, you've already lost. The only thing you need to do is stop the bleeding.
Right. And that's even virtually impossible until the parent decides to go pro se if they can emotionally handle going pro se.
There are, and I still believe there are great attorneys in the divorce realm. And
Mhm.
I know me recently here in Louisville, I've gotten a significant amount of support from attorneys. Essentially, I can't think off the top of my head of any non-family law attorneys that aren't supportive of what I'm doing.
Mhm.
There are a few family law attorneys that are uncomfortable, but it's also important to look at the fact that those may or may not be the individuals that are getting GAL and FOC appointments.
Mhm.
But the reality is, most lawyers in the realm, at least in my area, are sick of it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we've got to look at COVID. I really think COVID is what allowed family courts to just get next level in Kentucky. Now, where
Mhm.
you are in Pennsylvania and Colorado and California, those things have been happening or at least
Mhm.
been reported on for significantly longer.
Right. I mean, that was good and that was, bad. It was bad for businesses, but good for court because now there was Zoom. Everyone got to go in there and people were recording. People were recording so they could maybe play it back and say, gee, what really did happen? Because when you're in court, you're hearing all this stuff and they're saying that and you're trying to write down, even if you have an attorney, you're trying to take notes. But you want to play it back and just say what actually happened and then maybe show your mom or your dad
Right.
and get their second opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what changed the trajectory for how I'm speaking about this was me teaching at a public school for a semester.
Hmm.
And I went in from an extremely adversarial profession. And when I taught at a public school, a Title I public school, I got in that system and I was like, whoa, this is
Hmm.
not right. This is not okay. And I think when you're in a system for a long period of time, the changes are incremental over time. So the bad behavior and the inefficiency and the bad actors, it gets
Hmm.
minimized and it gets normalized. And I realized while teaching without having an education background, that's how people in family court feel.
Hmm.
Us lawyers are like, this is normal. The judge yells at us every day,
Oh.
or it takes 4 years because it becomes normalized over time. Or all of
Hmm.
these court appointed therapists, guardian ad litems, parenting coordinators, custodial evaluators, those appointments they were incremental in their increase and it became normal. After stepping out of that world, I'm like, what was I a part of?
But when you enter a profession, you don't know what you're getting into until you really get into it, like with nursing. You'll do a rotation for, like in a nursing home, but you're not getting the full picture because you're only in there for 3 weeks and then you're taking tests. Then you might go into pediatrics and then you're taking tests. You're not going through the whole, 12-hour shift of hell.
Right. Right. And I think that attorneys don't realize in family court how
Hmm.
wild it is. Like criminal attorneys, personal injury attorneys are like, I would never do that. No, ma'am. No,
Hmm.
sir. But then they go and watch and they're shocked. And I think people were truly shocked when I posted the video of Judge Lauren Ogden and the baby. They just couldn't believe that that is what happened. And you can tell the story, but it doesn't do it due diligence or justice unless you watch it. And you
Hmm.
watch, like, let's go back to what you said, because that's so true. You are literally in real time watching a baby essentially meet a stranger on a courthouse floor.
Oh, yeah.
In what world does that make sense to anyone?
I'm unclear of how old this baby is, but I wonder what this baby's thinking because, you know, I think family court creates a lot of personality disorders in these kids. And, you've got a judge sequestering kids with attorneys, grilling them about what's going on, and then not listening to their wishes anyway. Then you've got a kid coming out of there going, well, I don't respect authority. That judge didn't listen to me. And
And
their
all,
hope, go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Also, just the notion that we need court involvement to the level that we do, and these courts are making these decisions. Courts are extremely reactive, not proactive. And so
Hmm.
let's just say hypothetically that they get a decision wrong and a child is removed from contact with one parent, even for 2 months, pending a hearing. Like you said, what trauma does that do? What abandonment issues does that do? Are we creating little personality disorder people that, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but are we really creating little cluster five personalities?
Yes, I'm in agreement with that.
Because kids can't handle that level of conflict. And when it comes to that baby, and by no means am I a medical professional, but I cannot imagine that a child that hasn't seen a person and has a primary provider isn't traumatized by being removed from that primary provider.
Hmm.
And if you look at that case, that child was born in June.
Hmm.
The agreed order was signed in August of that year. The child was removed in October. The Court of Appeals intervened on two different levels, issuing
Oh,
an emergency order and a writ of prohibition, which I cannot articulate how extraordinarily rare
yeah.
that is. They ordered the child to be returned in November. So it appears 3 weeks maybe without dad. Now,
Ooh.
what's interesting in that case is that mom did not comply with the court order
Mhm.
from the emergency order from the Court of Appeals. That child was ordered to be returned by noon in Louisville, in Jefferson County, and the child wasn't.
Mm.
They essentially got dad to go to Bullitt County Courthouse, and grandma, paternal grandma, attempted to get the child through ex parte communications with that judge in Bullitt County. I apologize, and it was denied. Thank goodness.
Yeah, right.
But that child, and there was testimony that dad had lived with grandma. So I do have comfort, at least in the fact that the child was with, it appears the child was with someone that the child knew,
Hmm.
as opposed to mom, which the affidavits that have been recently filed indicate that mom didn't see the child after birth, that the child was literally delivered and then handed to dad in a separate room. Because, and I don't want to chastise mom here
Right.
as far as the beginning either. These are young people. The dad sent a letter to an adoption agency via an attorney because mom was indicating her wishes, allegedly, that she wanted to give the child up for adoption, which I'm not going to judge any
Uh-huh.
woman that wants to do that. That's not the point of this story. But if that's, those are just the facts as alleged.
Right. Yeah, I would rather, okay, so if I don't know, I'm just saying if this was me and I was single and having a baby and the father was okay and I didn't want the baby, I would say, hey, do you want the baby? Instead of putting it up for adoption, because you don't know what you're adopting it out to, like foster care, where more bad things can happen.
And
I don't, people
from
know.
all indications, though, it looks like that's what she did. It looks
Mhm.
like that because she did sign the agreed order prior to birth saying, I don't want visitation. Dad can have sole custody.
Mm.
And then she followed up with that 2 months after birth. So it does appear, we don't know the inner workings of these two. it's possible, hypothetically, that dad was maybe thinking, I don't know, in the beginning, and mom was just covering all her bases.
Hmm.
So it appears that mom was cooperative and that this, I mean, from all indication, she put this in writing and signed it in the presence of a notary. So she wanted dad to have sole custody,
Hmm.
according to that document. Now, there have been pleadings to the contrary filed since.
That is one crazy case.
Wild.
So, so this baby is living with dad and his and the grandma.
The testimony that that's what happened initially, but then dad met a girl and moved to Tennessee. And also, I'm not saying that you don't have to follow the relocation statute, but let's not act like Kentucky and Tennessee is Kentucky and Mexico, okay?
Right, right.
Especially if the parties were in Bullitt County, you can be in Tennessee in an hour and a half, easy. And
Mhm.
it appears that, we don't know if these parties were actually from Louisville or from Bullitt County. Perhaps they're from Tennessee or have lived in Tennessee previously. There's no testimony to that because the judge still, at this point,
Mhm.
the child will be one. And I have found zero testimony from father in the court record. Zero.
Jeez.
So you cannot make this kind of stuff up. And that's, I think, the Court of Appeals issued in the writ of mandamus talking about how it is the role of a family court judge or a circuit court to not invite chaos into custody disputes. And that is exactly what that court did. And
Hmm.
let's just take a step back and you talk about family court destroying families. This family will never be the same. And imagine if when grandma came to court, it was handled respectfully and with due process. And sure, dad could have been mad or hurt by his own mother's actions,
Hmm.
but this took it to another level. I struggle to think that paternal mom, or so grandma, and dad will ever have a relationship again.
Right. It's like it is an essential family court case because when a parent remarries, that's usually when hell breaks loose. When
Somebody
another,
starts dating and it's just all over.
hmm, that's
And
when it
this
goes
grandma
crazy.
testifies to things that are concerning. And it's just basically that he's met someone and that grandma doesn't know this new person. But again, the testimony was never rebutted. And we don't get to impose our socioeconomic beliefs onto other people.
Hmm. Hmm.
You don't have to make the best decision every time while you're parenting.
Hmm.
And making a subpar decision or a mediocre decision shouldn't result in the removal of your child.
Right. I'm glad he has gotten this child back. And like you said, I don't know if he'll have a relationship with his own mother now,
Right,
which is also not good for the grandchild
right.
unless he does supervised visits with the grandmother.
Which grandma at this point, to my knowledge, has not filed anything. I don't personally believe, just as an outsider looking at the case, that she has any standing. But
Hmm.
if we're really talking about best interest of the child, what's in the child's best interest? Now, obviously grandma's behavior is completely inappropriate,
Hmm.
but could they have worked through it, or could grandma have just been emotional in the moment if they were living there, and just
Right.
freaked out? But I just think this goes to the next level, which is super concerning.
Yeah, I think you're right. Even if she was worried or flipping out, always, I think people should talk to each other more and say, "Hey, son, I don't know about her. These are my concerns."
Hmm.
Instead of running into a courtroom
Hmm.
and creating this chaos.
What's also uncertain, no one cross-examined grandma on any of her past decisions. I mean,
Mhm.
how many times had she been married? Had she ever eloped? Things of
Yeah,
those kind of nature.
yeah.
Because we look at this instead of allowing human beings to be human beings,
Hmm.
and who hasn't made a poor, again, what some may consider to be a poor decision when you're in love, but still
Mhm.
you don't remove people's children.
Exactly. And who knows, the girl he's dating or getting married to, maybe she is a different religion from what the mother-in-law or the grandma is.
I mean, we have no idea.
We
And
have no
Grandma
idea.
testified that she's tried to look her up and find her, but it's not Grandma's child.
Right.
It's Dad's child. And I don't like to get lost in the minutia of the mom versus dad because I
Right.
do think that goes down a rabbit hole. Um, that being
Hmm.
said, this case in particular, imagine a father that hadn't seen the child essentially since birth, according to the pleadings, and that the child is just handed over as an infant to dad. That's not going to happen. I do think this is a case where, and also given the fact of Judge Ogden's recent over cases overturned by the Court of Appeals, there seems to be a pattern where this judge in particular is siding with females or moms.
Hmm. Yeah, I've always thought, and I'm sure that there's bias in one county for fathers or bias in another county for moms. These judges they're their own personality disorders as well. I've talked to so many parents where I've interviewed a veteran who went before a male judge, and because the male judge had a horrible tragedy in his own family, he was putting that back onto this litigant, along with a female judge doing this to a mother having some weird thing happen in her past, and she probably never went to counseling or a therapist or discussed this, and she's putting it onto her litigants, and the litigant's child is suffering because of this.
Absolutely. All people bring their own bias when they're looking at anything. We all have our own traumas, stories, experiences. Each individual judge would rule on a case very differently,
Mm-hmm.
which goes back to your fundamental point is that family court needs to be abolished. It is too subjective.
Mm-hmm.
If you went into criminal court and filed a motion to suppress, 9 out of 10 times the judges are going to have the same ruling. There's obviously going to be outliers, and I have zero expectation that judges will get it right every time. That is
Mm-hmm.
unrealistic. No one does. But in family court, 10 judges, 10 different rulings.
Mm-hmm.
Make it make sense. Same fact pattern. You would have one judge that would suspend parenting time. One would do an equal parenting schedule. One would do every other weekend. One would
Mm-hmm.
do 2, 2, 3. One would do week on, week off. One would order an evaluation. There is no consistency. And that is not how a court of law is supposed to operate.
Right. Exactly. In fact, I'll make it quick, but I had some custodial interference going on in my case where my attorney filed an emergency petition and we went before another judge. And I'm telling you, Christine, he was hot. I couldn't even look at him. I had to look down. As soon as I walked in the room and saw that, I had to look down. And I just let the attorney do all the talking. And this judge he was on point. He started yelling at my ex. How dare you withhold these kids? And I'm going to write an order right now where mom sees these kids 3 times a week, which he was giving me more time than the corrupt family court judge. However, the ex also disobeyed his orders. And when we went in front of the usual, very old, decrepit family court judge, he just gave him a slap on the wrist and totally disregarded that judge's order.
Exactly. We have too many chefs in the kitchen. There's too
Right.
many avenues to get ex parte hearings, ex parte orders. There is no continuity, lack of consistency. I mean, quite frankly, in the case with Judge Ogden, in the right county, in the right circumstance, Grandma may have got that ex parte order. And then you're litigating a case in a different county.
Yeah, this is scary. That should not even be happening.
No, and I think the fact that they didn't comply with the Court of Appeals in
Mhm.
returning that child in an emergency order, I don't know how that doesn't seal Grandma's fate in perpetuity because you can't violate orders like that. And you sure can't violate orders from the Court of Appeals that are issued on an emergency basis, in
But
my
then,
opinion.
right. Well, but then there's no repercussions. These these people that are pulling this, there's no repercussions.
Well, yeah, and if you look at Judge Ogden's record or another case where she was overturned on appeal, the Court of Appeals in February of this year sent it back, overturned her. Dad still doesn't have the children back. And he's been filing motions. Now he's pro
Oh,
se, but we are in May. This case was on Monday. And the supervised visitations in Dad's case started in February of 2024.
mm,
So those three children haven't seen their father in an unsupervised setting for more than a year.
uh,
Even though the Court of Appeals said, whoa, Judge, you abused your discretion here. So you've got the fact that the trial family court says, through her actions, I don't have to listen to the Court of Appeals, it appears. You also have children at a young age without fully developed frontal lobes that haven't seen their father in an unrestricted manner for over a year. Who knows what they've been told
I was just going to say that.
or what they haven't been told?
Hmm.
I don't know how you remedy that.
That is a hot mess because those kids are being brainwashed. They're being Stockholm syndrome. There could be a lot of alienation going on. By the time he ever sees those kids, they won't know him. And then they're going to be told different things about him.
Let's say best case scenario that mom in that case believed her child was in danger, got the supervised visits. They've been doing the supervised visits and mom didn't say anything negative about dad. Let's say best case scenario. The children are still going to have abandonment issues.
Hmm.
You can't negate even that. And on the flip side, I am not saying that there aren't people that should have their children removed. I'm not saying that there aren't people that should have supervised parenting time
Hmm.
because there are. There are people out there that shouldn't have access to their own children because of their own behavior, mental health issues, safety issues.
Hmm.
But it shouldn't be handed out like candy.
Hmm.
And judges should understand the gravity of the decisions they're making.
And and they're not. And I just think I don't know how you feel about this, but if a parent had access to a jury, if they wanted one, I know a jury would be somewhat costly, but if it was this bad, especially when false allegations come in, when that should be handled criminally and not in family court,
I
it's
100% believe in jury trials, and I don't think they would be there would be a cost associated for sure. But in this country, we've decided that constitutional rights matter. The Constitution is supposed to be of the utmost importance, and you have a constitutionally protected right to parent your children or child.
hmm.
And we have unequivocal evidence that juries are seeing these cases differently. If you look at the Colorado action where mom had her kids taken away and through family court, and then the jury in a civil matter ruled for mom to the tune of millions of dollars.
Hmm.
But we 100% need juries. If we're going to keep family court, we need more checks and balances.
Right.
You could be in criminal court and have a prosecutor that's got it out for you times 100 and is coming at you, coming at you, coming at you.
Hmm.
The judge could be very pro prosecution, but you put 12 people in a box and let them make a decision. And we
Hmm.
have seen that save the day because people are wrongly accused. But yes, I'm a
Hmm.
fan. Box them up.
Yeah, exactly. I just don't know. I mean, the family court, it like here in Pennsylvania, you've got the family court and then you've got the child support court. So like the family court judge I had, he was just out of it and he was running it like a three-ring circus. Like one minute he's talking about a pension fund, then he's talking about family court custody issues, then he's talking about child support. I'm like, it's like there's something wrong with him. But anyway, he did die of pancreatitis, but that seriously didn't help my case either. But that's why we've got to get rid of family court is they're they're not sticking to these. There's no rules. I tried explaining this to a mom yesterday. There's no rules. You do know that, don't you?
They don't prepare for court. And
Yeah.
so that's the importance too of having cameras in courtrooms. When you say 1 second they're mentioning child support, the next second they're mentioning visitation. I just recently posted a video out of Louisville Family Court where you've got a judge that's just flipping through the file for like 10 or 15, 20 minutes trying
Mm,
to figure out what's going on, all while saying crazy things,
mm,
or dismissive things is the more appropriate way to say it.
hmm.
She did say on the record, "Sir, I know this child longer than your some family members." And you're like, "Do you though?"
Yeah.
Or is that the problem? Also, I had a really great point someone pointed out to me on TikTok is, can you imagine if you took your child to a pediatrician and the pediatrician told you, "Listen, I've known this child longer than some family members." You'd get a different pediatrician.
Oh, yeah, that's
It
creepy.
it's condescending.
Oh.
It's controlling. And these judges have lived in this little protected vacuum where no one has talked about
Mhm.
what's happening in an objective way. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. And I want to be so clear. I don't ever want to diminish what somebody's gone through in family court.
Hmm.
But the messaging from victims of family court is problematic because it's almost impossible to believe that it's as bad as it is. And also, the person telling the story has an extremely vested interest in it.
Hmm.
And so that's why I would like to step back and just be objective. I did that post about how we need to stop calling family court the C word. And I got a lot of negative pushback from that. And I'm not saying it isn't, but what I'm saying is if you go down, you're walking down the street and you see someone with a sign saying the government is corrupt, you're like, what happened to that guy?
Hmm.
You may have sympathy and empathy for him, but you don't necessarily want to debate with him or think he is the paramount of objective truth.
Hmm.
And that's why patterns are so important. This is what I have seen in family court practicing a decade.
Hmm.
Judges aren't prepared. Judges are treating litigants and attorneys completely inappropriately and with a complete lack of respect. Judges aren't ruling timely. Judges
Hmm.
aren't following the law. Judges have godlike complexes.
Hmm.
Judges aren't enforcing their own orders, or on the flip, they're over enforcing their own orders. They make a decision and they stick with it through the rest of the case. And I could go on and on and on. Those are patterns, and they're not just happening here.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's everywhere. I've talked to so many parents that I just don't know what to say. There's like once they take a child away from a good fit parent, and it's like they're lucky if they get them back. In what condition?
Right.
And
And you want to make a person crazy, take their kids.
right.
That's all you got to do. Somebody on the brink, on the cusp, on top of the fact that if you're going through a divorce or a breakup or a custody battle, you're already going through one of the worst times in your life. And
Hmm.
then you just add tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt, experts micromanaging and
Oh.
criticizing your every move.
Hmm.
It won't take long to break a person. And I don't think people on the outside understand that.
No, no, they don't. And like you said, you've got people micromanaging, and it's also bad when CPS is involved, and you've got one-sided cases. And I'm hearing this from parents as well. It's like they only talk to the other side of the party,
Mhm.
and then they go before the judge, and the judge just relies on what CPS or the guardian ad litem is going to spew out, and they just go with that so they don't have to be burdened with making a decision or thinking for themselves.
The third party CPS, GALs, they reduce the judge's liability. The judge can say, "Whoa, I relied on this expert or this government official to make my decision,"
Hmm.
which insulates them from accountability. Absolutely.
Hmm.
CPS gets it wrong. GALs get it wrong. Now, there are great GALs. There are great CPS workers. It's just like law enforcement. They're not even remotely close to all bad, but the silence of the good ones ruins the whole system.
Right. right? And if they're a good one, then they get rid of them.
Or if they're a good one, they leave. How many
Hmm.
good attorneys and good caseworkers and good social workers literally can't take it anymore?
Right.
And CPS workers, if you talk to them off the record, they will tell you horror stories from family court and how horrified they are with some of these judges' decisions.
Mhm.
And frankly, we've gotten to a point where CPS isn't automatically believed in family court. These judges, a lot of times, are just doing whatever they want whenever they want
Hmm.
based on their own beliefs. And these cases are confidential. So we can't see what's happening.
Yeah, that, and this is where I go also with I think CPS should be abolished. There should be something else in its place. The corruption is too deep there. They're incentivized. There's too much money involved. I don't know if any of this will get fixed or rectified because of the Title IV incentives. I don't know.
The money is a problem. I think first step, let's just start here. Just like with law enforcement, let's have CPS where body cams
Hmm.
and let's have court live streamed.
Right. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think parents should also be wearing body cams. When you are in a custody battle, I think you should be wearing a body cam because uh, the the ex will say, "Well, he or she was talking about with the kids. Never happened. Here's my body cam. Never happened. Do you want to see footage for the last 24 hours?"
The problem I have with that is the normalization of children being recorded.
I know. I
Be
know.
and I don't believe that children should be recorded, generally speaking, but we don't have continuity again from the family court. If you look at Adair versus Emberton, I posted that video where a judge was overturned. And the GAL in that case said, well, normally I don't believe in recording children, but I'm glad I had the recording from this one. And you're
Mm.
like, make a decision.
Mhm, mhm.
But I think if we bring awareness or if awareness is brought to the big picture, it would stop people's bad behavior to some degree. Family
Mhm.
court is a playground for high conflict people.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they will play and torture and use every tool in their toolbox to keep the case going.
Mhm.
And that's the mechanism that needs to stop. Like the circus needs to stop.
Yeah.
The judges need to realize people don't need to spend $200,000 on a divorce, $300,000 on a divorce.
Yes.
Unless the one thing that I do believe experts are really good at and is really beneficial for divorce would be forensic accounting. If you're in a a high asset divorce, forensic accounting is great. I don't really see any problems with it. But that's a different ballgame. If you're worth a couple $1,000,000, maybe
Hmm.
your divorce will cost a couple $100,000,
Hmm.
but not with the children. These custodial evaluations are out of control. And I really haven't had time to deep dive into them as much as I wanted to with getting all of these court recordings. But custodial evaluations
Hmm.
are junk.
Right. Right. And I was interviewing someone where she only talked to the evaluator for 1 hour and their life was hell for 5 years in family court, hadn't even seen her kids in 5 years.
Mhm.
And they're doing more damage to parents and children. Just get rid of them. The judge has got to rely on evidence, and they won't even look at evidence.
Exactly. They need to have hearings. The judge needs to go back to making these decisions. Custodial evaluators charge exorbitant amounts of money. And they, like you said, may talk to the parties for 1 hour. They may
Mm.
talk to the pediatrician, which how well does your pediatrician know your child or your parenting? And if you're a high conflict person or on the narcissistic spectrum, you are going to go to the doctor and look like mommy or daddy of the year. That is
Right.
literally the definition of narcissistic personality traits is that you look great in public. You can put a mask on and be the most doting and caring
Mhm.
mother or father for 10 minutes in the waiting room and 8-minute interaction with the doctor.
And or better yet, they'll send the step parent in with the child. And And the doctor will just listen to what the stepmother has to say and write a prescription.
There are the medical decisions. I mean, it's just there's so many problems on so many different levels.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to pinpoint one thing that the court is doing over and over and over that's making it bad, if that makes sense. Where
Hmm.
it's like I was speaking with someone that is a sociologist, actually,
Oh,
and
cool.
there are people that are starting to look into family court as far as what is this doing to society, because there's been little to no reporting and little to no, there are very few books on the issue from outsiders, from an
Hmm.
objective person looking at it that didn't experience it. And she was like, basically all a parent needs to do is get one person on their side and the case just spirals from there.
Right.
So you could have CPS say this is unsubstantiated. You could have a doctor say this abuse didn't happen. And then you have a custodial evaluator that says alienation. And it's like, well, whoa. And maybe who's to say who's right? Or on
Hmm.
the flip side, I've seen CPS substantiate abuse claims.
Hmm.
Then you have a doctor writing down and corroborating, that the child is making these abuse allegations. And then a custodial evaluator just comes in and says, whoa, 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 there's no abuse. Like, who's right?
Oh,
And now
right.
the case is going to go on forever and ever. And let's just take a step back. If you have a mom that believes her child was abused and CPS substantiates it, she heard the child say something, and then you have a custodial evaluator that says, no, it doesn't, that mother is going to do anything and everything to protect her child if she legitimately believes it,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So there are people that believe that abuse happened, and then there are people that fabricate abuse. Like there's not a one size fits all.
Right. And 50-50 isn't cookie cutter.
No.
I mean, okay, so if you've got two normal personalities, and I've seen it. I have a friend who co-parented with her ex, and they each, oh, get this, they each shared the driving length. So they would meet in the middle instead of saying, now, like my ex did, I had to do all the driving 2 hours up and 2 hours back. There was no meeting in the middle with this one. But there are people that actually can co-parent, but you
Mhm.
cannot with a personality disorder.
Mm-mm. Nope. And you will find that there will be reports saying this person is on the narcissistic spectrum. Let's do equal parenting time. And it's like, well, make that make sense.
Yeah.
And I don't think that regulation is necessarily going to fix this. I think all things considered, best case scenario, the parties should have equal access and share their child or children in the event they are, like you said, normal parents. But I see that all the time.
Hmm.
You see parents, when I was practicing, they may be mad for a minute. Divorce is hard. They may do things to each other that in hindsight, hey, I shouldn't have done that, yada, yada. But a lot of people work this out on their own. Now, what
Hmm.
I do see is, and I'm very wary of the obsession with 50-50 in the event that somebody's like, I want 187.5 nights a year. That's not realistic either. Like stuff happens with kids, and the kid may need to have a project due that dad's working on, and so may stay, 52% at dad's one year, and then grandparents may be ill on mom's side, and so they stay 60% at mom's house the next year.
Right.
That's good co-parenting. That's
Right.
normal, putting the child first, not being so regulated. Tuesday is my night, no matter what. That is
Yep.
it. That is
Yep.
it. That is problematic to me. That is a
Oh,
sign of high conflict personalities. And, now that being said, if you're dealing with a high conflict person, you aren't willing to exchange nights because you're not going to get the same grace. So it's just a mess, really. It's a mess.
definitely. And again, with these step parents, when I was all new to this, my ex was out of town. So technically, I should have had the kids, but it was his time to have the kids, but he was out of town, out of the country. Okay.
Hmm.
So the stepmother had the kids, and there was a birthday party that the youngest one had to go to. So I texted her. I said, there's a birthday party. Can you drop Johnny off there? And she just gave me big ones. And so eventually I shamed her into taking this my child to this poor kid's birthday party. Then I told my lawyer and she says, "You mean you didn't know that when he's out of the country or much less out of town, you get the kids?" I said, "How would I know that?"
Well, that's the other thing too, and is the fact that pro se litigants are treated to the same level, treated are as attorneys are, or at least they're supposed to be, which I understand, but then that's problematic because we bill at a rate we are specifically educated in this field. And so certainly there's a different standard, in my opinion, that you can hold me to as opposed to you if you're in court arguing a case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the right of first refusal, the courts are really, I'm seeing them get away from that in its entirety. And I
Mm-hmm.
see both sides of it. And this is where I bring my own bias because I'm extremely close with my stepfather.
Mm-hmm.
And step parents can be great. But now, to my stepfather, when I was at school, they would call him Mr. Miller, which that's
Mm-hmm.
my last name. He has a different last name. And an example of him, he would never correct them
Mm-hmm.
where you've got a high conflict person, they're like, oh, da 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 da. And I'm not saying everyone in my family was perfect the entire time through a divorce,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. But generally speaking, you know, it worked out.
Right. I mean, some things can work out. When I remarried, the kid said, "Well, do we call him Dad?" I said, "No, you call him by his first name." And they said, "Well, is our last name going to change?" I said, "No, your last name is going to stay the same."
Mhm.
You know, like there were no problems in the beginning, but
Which is, in your case in particular, there is typically a moment where it changes, and you have to look at that moment. And I
mm,
think if I'm remembering correctly, that's when the new stepmom came into the picture. It was, everything just spiraled from there, which I wish the courts would see clearly. Hey,
right.
hey, hey, you can't typically people don't just change completely. Like they don't just all of a sudden, they're not just great parents or adequate parents even for 12 years. And then all of a sudden, everything they do is abusive. That
Hmm.
to me should be a red flag, unless there's significant substance abuse.
Right. And we had co-parented for 10 years where the stepmother did enter the picture, where I do believe she started brainwashing the oldest one. Then so they got married in '07. I remarried in 2011. Then by 2012, hell breaks loose.
Mm.
And I thought, gee, we went from co-parenting really well. Now I'm in family court. They're calling me crazy and I'm alienating the kids. It's like, look at the pattern. See, they didn't, the judge, well, it was, it was rigged. The whole thing was rigged. But I'm just saying any normal judge would look at and say, okay, so they've been co-parenting for 10 years. Get out of my courtroom and keep co-parenting.
Yes, and I do think we need to talk about the conflict of interest because we haven't talked about that in particular with Judge Ogden. And I'm not sure of the legal standard in Pennsylvania, but the legal standard in Kentucky is the appearance of a conflict is enough to create the conflict or to create the
Yes.
reason to get out of the case. And so what happened in Judge Ogden's presiding over the case with the baby is that come to find out, um, well, actually, in Judge Ogden's case, the mom in that matter hired the judge's personal divorce attorney.
Right.
And her divorce was sealed. And so you couldn't verify when the representation happened. Now, they went on the record saying it was an uncontested matter and that the representation had concluded. So it's not a current client, which in my opinion, it's still an appearance of a conflict. And what
It's
this
tainted.
attorney did um, was file. What the attorney for dad did when he filed a Rule 11, the judge was in a situation where the judge was going to potentially have to listen to evidence and listen to a hearing about whether or not her own personal divorce attorney should be sanctioned. And that in and of itself is an impossibility for the judge to do, in my opinion, objectively without the appearance of a conflict. I think I got a little colluded here there with that story, but it feels a certain kind of way. It shouldn't be
Mhm.
happening, in my opinion.
Then,
And we have all of these. It's a very small world. So we have relationships with these custodial evaluators, prior judges, you
mhm.
know, current judges. And it just to an outsider, it feels wrong.
Right. I mean, knowing that this divorce happened with that divorce attorney, she should have taken one look at that then and there and said, I have to recuse myself.
I think so too. And I think that it was shocking that she indicated that she was not going to recuse in her pre-ruling and then in court did decide to recuse. And it was ironic because I was present. I hadn't been in court in probably 2 or 3 years. And she did make a little dig at me, or what I perceived to be a dig,
Mm-hmm.
saying, like, I'm going to put this child first, unlike people in this courtroom with self-serving interest.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And let me be clear, all I want is for these judges to do their job,
Hmm.
period. And know the law. And I realized what happened in my particular situation with one judge acting inappropriately, and then kind of having a vendetta or retaliating against myself when I was representing other clients.
Hmm.
That's really when I took a step back, but I didn't realize how often these judges, you don't want to mess with them because they're going to come for you.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, even I was making during family court and I was going to the appeals, I made a fun little YouTube, just a joke like, if you want your attorney to call, do this. And I turned on the vacuum sweeper. I mean, it's supposed to be funny because every time I was vacuuming, that's when my attorney would call. I'm not kidding. So I thought it was being funny. Then I made another one where I said, a pro se doesn't have to pay a dime. You might have to pay court fees, you might have to pay child support, who knows? But technically, you don't have to pay. And so when I went to Superior Court, the judge on the right-hand side who slept through everybody else's, pleadings, he woke up for mine. And he brought that up. He says, so pro ses don't have to pay a dime. And I thought, ooh, there's a lot of collusion here.
Had you put that in the record, or was that just something you had posted privately?
I didn't put it in the record. It was just out there on YouTube.
Yeah, certainly judges should not be considering things that are not happening before them. I do think the judges would benefit their cause if they just got off of social media.
Hmm. Hmm.
Just completely get off social media.
Right.
They're not doing themselves any service, and they have higher political aspirations. Um, and they need to not watch what's happening in cases over which they're presiding in the public arena.
Hmm. Hmm.
Period. Period. You know?
Exactly, exactly. And I know we discussed Mr. Henry before, and I don't know, he still doesn't have his daughter back.
That's a tough case. And it's a heartbreaking case. And it's a case that I wish got as much attention as the baby case. I wish a lot of them
Hmm.
got as much attention. And hopefully, I think they will soon. But that's a case where mom was with a man that actually shot her minor child, and mom didn't seek medical treatment. This was in Judge Ogden's case. At the
Hmm.
time of the shooting, I actually was representing him, and he had been in a lengthy custody battle. And he had perpetually said to me, I was a new attorney on his case at the time, relatively new. And he perpetually said to me that my child's in danger. And then this happened, and he got the child for a significant period of time.
Hmm. Hmm.
He was pro se, and the child is, when he went on your podcast, the child is back with mom, as far as I can tell. And I just can't imagine the defeat that Mr. Henry's feeling right now and the worry.
He's a good dad. I mean, it should just be, that should have been done and over with, that mom will never have custody after her boyfriend shot this child and didn't seek attention till what, 2 days later?
I think it was about 15 hours later, and it
Okay.
was really, I think there's body cam footage because she was actually charged with a felony, or with a couple felonies, one of which was intimidating a witness in a legal proceeding.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and she got a diversion on that. the reality is that's a case right there where, in my opinion,
Hmm.
supervised visitation is the most that mom should ever get, if
Right.
that. But
Right.
that is no, 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 no. There are things that you can do as a parent where it's like, okay, you learn your lesson, or that may have not been the best judgment call, but we can correct, we can pivot. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
That is not one of them.
Right. Right.
Because who
And
knows what that mom is telling the child as far as like how great I am or what that mom lets the child do.
yeah, and that mom doesn't have the greatest um, dating record. What is, I mean, she's going to put that onto her daughter as well. She's going to teach her how to date. That's
Oh,
scary.
plethora of problems. There's just a plethora of problems, and that case needs more media attention. That was what was shocking to me is the fact that that case didn't blow up in the media, and the local media just seems to not care about what's happening in family court, which is so shocking to me. And when I was at court on Monday, one of the judges went on white noise, like they push a button and it
Oh,
goes in the back.
mm-hmm,
And I can't verify this, but with my own eyes, I think she said, "Why is Christine Miller in my courtroom?"
mm-hmm.
And there's not that kind of reaction when the media is in a district courtroom or a circuit courtroom. Now, the judges may not love it. They may not
Yeah.
want the media to be there every day, but they're
Mhm.
not going to call up a member of law enforcement and be like, "Why is she in there?" Completely inappropriate. I think these judges have lost all sense of reality. They have forgotten where they came from. I'll tell you,
Mm-hmm.
in a year of doing this in Louisville, Kentucky, I have not gotten not one person, not one message, not one DM, not one comment, not one email complimenting the current 10 judges on the bench. Not individually. I have gotten very limited messages about how the older judges were better, or they
Mm-hmm.
respected a certain judge that's retired. And I tend to agree that the judges prior were better, but these judges have forgotten where they came from,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they don't have any allies in the community.
No. And they should also have tamper-proof mics while I throw that in there.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that court should be live streamed. Now, I think there's circumstances where no, maybe not. I mean, I agree, but we have to be practical about it. But if you're going to have a case as a matter of public record, and I'm not talking about TikTok live streams, that's different. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's fair to the judge if we're looking at this objective to have an hour-long hearing and start
Mm-hmm.
recording 45 minutes in because you missed the whole first part of the testimony. And I'm not saying people aren't going to break it into snippets. That's different. But just have court live streamed. Just when you go on the bench, you're calling your case and the court could see what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They all aspire to be Judge Judy. Be Judge Judy.
Right.
And the people that signed up for Judge Judy, they chose to be on that show and they knew the demeanor for which she would speak to them. But you just shouldn't be speaking. They should not be speaking to litigants or attorneys the way they do. Period. End of story. It's inappropriate. You
Mm-hmm.
aren't going to get that kind of treatment in criminal court.
Right. Right. Do you want to go into the Dr. Russell case? I won't keep you too much longer, but
The Dr. Russell case
yeah.
in Louisville makes me feel a certain kind of way. And let me be clear that I don't know much about the case in the sense I was not involved in the case. I remember the case being on a regular basis in Division 7, which is Denise Brown, which is the TikTok judge that, in my opinion, inappropriately uses TikTok, and the sole reason that I am even speaking about problems in family court.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something about that case that just feels like it needs to be looked into more. There are
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people in the public that have visceral feelings about it. She's currently incarcerated for attempted murder, I believe, or allegedly tried, I guess not allegedly at this point because she's pled guilty, but the allegations were that she hired a hitman. There's more to this story in my opinion, and I think it would be a Netflix documentary.
Oh,
Like
yes.
I did a TikTok and it's like that's one of those cases where I feel like if someone just Venmoed me $100,000,
Oh
I
yeah.
could take 6 months to look into it and like hire someone to, help me produce it. But it just feels a certain kind of way. Now, I'm open to the fact I'm a human being. I'm not a family court judge. I can get it wrong. And I've been wrong
Mhm.
before. I have made mistakes. In no way, shape, or form am I perfect. I have regrets. There are things that I did while practicing
Mhm.
that were just normal at the time that I wouldn't do now. And so I don't want anyone to think I'm coming in like I am just like squeaky clean, all of the things, because I'm not
Mhm.
even trying to come from that narrative. But I saw what I saw. I was in the system for a decade. I saw how these judges behave, and it's not okay. And a
No.
lot of lawyers feel the same
Mhm.
way I do. I hate the fact that there are so many people like yourself that just think all lawyers are in on it.
Mhm.
Um, and I wish attorneys would realize, y'all, this is the perception the public has of us. So
Mhm.
step up and show them otherwise.
Mhm. Now, I did have one great attorney who represented me at the end
Hmm.
because it's like, as a pro se, then I had the heart attack. It's like, I can't do this. I can't go back because I had won in Superior Court, the case 406 WDA 2017. And I told my husband, I said, I hate to do this, but we have to pay a $4,000 retainer fee. I can't go in there against this vengeful judge because even
Hmm.
my therapist said this is not a normal behavior with a judge. She is continuously, and that was Judge Elizabeth Kelly in the Erie County Courthouse. Sorry, it's on record. And so, I had this attorney go in with me, and she was brilliant. And this judge, she had to toe the line. And this attorney said to her, Your Honor, you have to abide by what the Superior Court ruled. And every time my attorney opened her mouth, we were sustained. It was like this, I've never seen anything like this. She was so good that she didn't even use up my whole retainer. I got like $1,400 back. So she was a good lawyer. She was
There's a
a,
lot of them
yeah,
out there. And when
yeah.
I was in court on Monday, it was really unique to see because I hadn't seen a lot of these attorneys. There were two major players that were there, both super respectful of me. They've tried real cases.
Hmm.
And they could care less if the media watched them every step of the way. In fact, I think they may like it because
Yeah.
people would see how good they are, how good of litigators they are. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I'm not saying that they're the best fit for every divorce, and they wouldn't say that. They are litigators through and through, and they will do a good job for your case. There were a ton of other attorneys, like I consider myself to be solos, and, that are great lawyers that are telling clients, stay out of court, stay out of court, stay out of
Yeah.
court. And it's so fascinating because we posted the video with Susan Bassey out of
Hmm.
California. And she indicated to me that somebody called her and said, Thank you so much for telling me to stay out of court. It wasn't until I saw
Hmm.
Christine's video that I realized this is how crazy it can get. So there are a lot of good lawyers out there that are just sick of it. And
Hmm.
these judges have gone too far. And I think they have just stepped over the line. I don't know if you saw the Boston Globe, which is a legit,
Hmm. Hmm.
massive, media. They did a story yesterday about problems in family court. You got
Good.
the Denver Gazette doing phenomenal work out of Colorado about family courts. And I think time's up.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
judges are the new cops. Time's up with getting away with everything, with the media not reporting at it, with your footage not being released, with the good old boy or the good old girl system. It's over. Those days are over.
Hmm.
Enough people have been affected by family court and they want answers and they want accountability.
Hmm. I'm so glad you came on. I don't want to keep you too much longer,
Yeah.
but
So this has been great. And you were one of the first people that I talked to when I really started questioning the system on a bigger scale. And I just appreciate it so much. I mean, I really, really do. I think it's so hard. I can't imagine what you deal with on a day-to-day basis
mm,
because it's hard
mm,
for me with as many messages and I can't
uh,
answer everybody. I can't. And it would be a full-time job.
right.
And I can't imagine the struggles that you've gone over the last decade. And it's just I'm so grateful to be able to have these conversations.
I'm glad we can. And I saw your TikToks and I thought, this is great. I mean, someone's speaking out about this. So
So,
I encourage everyone to speak out. And I'd like to have you back on again. And
Absolutely. And you can find me at Kentucky Christine on TikTok, and it's Miller Time Louisville on YouTube and Instagram. Also, Susan Bassey on YouTube. Follow her. There are a lot of people that have been doing this work, not me, a lot of people that have been doing this work, like you, Susan Bassey, for a significant period of time. And we just need to get all of those names out because people just need to go listen to everyone. And I don't agree with what everyone says all the time. And I'm sure you don't agree with what I say all the time.
I
But
do.
let's have the conversations. But
Yeah.
let's just have the conversations.
Right, right. And you can I give out your email too as well or no?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's MillerTimeLouisville at Gmail.
Great. Hey, thank you so very much for your time, but don't jump off, okay?
Okay.
Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Attorney Christine Miller. I totally appreciate it. Thank you.